The boardroom backstab. A story of corporate betrayal and perfect revenge. She built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch, while her business partners smiled and shook hands. But while she was busy growing the empire, he was secretly selling it piece by piece to their biggest competitor. When she discovered the betrayal, she orchestrated the most devastating corporate takedown in business history. Welcome back to Consequences and Co. ***, where every handshake hides a potential backstab and every boardroom meeting could be your last. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the cutthroat world of corporate betrayal with a story that will make you question everyone you work with. This is the tale of Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant innovator who trusted the wrong person and nearly lost everything she'd built. But when betrayal knocked her down, she got back up swinging harder than anyone expected. Get ready for a masterclass in strategic revenge served at room temperature in the boardroom. Hit that like button if you're ready to see corporate greed meet its match. And let's dive into this incredible story of justice in a three-piece suit. Chapter 1, The Dream Partnership. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had always believed that success was a team sport. At 34, she'd already revolutionized medical device technology with her innovative cardiac monitoring systems, but she knew she needed a business partner to scale her breakthrough inventions into a global company. Enter Richard Blackwood, charming, connected, and carrying an MBA from Wharton along with 15 years of corporate experience. When he approached Sarah at a medical technology conference, proposing a partnership that would combine her innovations with his business expertise, it seemed like destiny. "You're the brilliant inventor," Richard had said over dinner at an exclusive restaurant. "I'm the business strategist. Together, we can build an empire that saves lives and makes us both very wealthy." Sarah was cautious by nature, a quality that had served her well in both scientific research and business, but Richard's credentials were impeccable. His references glowed. His track record showed consistent success in scaling tech startups. Most importantly, he seemed to genuinely believe in her vision of making advanced medical monitoring accessible to hospitals worldwide. They incorporated medtech innovations 6 months later, with Sarah as Chief Technology Officer and majority shareholder at 55%, and Richard as CEO with 45%. Sarah retained control of all patents and intellectual property, while Richard handled operations, sales, and investor relations. The first 3 years were everything Sarah had dreamed of. Her devices revolutionized patient monitoring in intensive care units, reducing mortality rates and catching critical changes hours earlier than traditional systems. Hospitals competed to install their equipment. Medical journals praised their innovations. The company grew from 5 employees to over 200. Richard seemed to be the perfect partner, always supportive, incredibly effective at managing the business side, and genuinely excited about their mission. He regularly praised Sarah's work in board meetings and interviews, calling her the brilliant mind behind our success. By year 4, MedTech Innovations was valued at $47 million and expanding internationally. Sarah was being courted by major universities for research partnerships. Richard was featured on business magazine covers as one of the year's most promising young CEOs. Everything was perfect until Sarah discovered it was all built on lies. Chapter 2, The First Crack in the Foundation. The discovery began with something trivial, a misfiled invoice that landed on Sarah's desk instead of accounting. The bill was from a consulting firm she'd never heard of, Blackwood Strategic Solutions, for proprietary technology assessment services totaling $50,000. Sarah's scientific mind immediately noticed the obvious. The consulting firm shared Richard's last name. When she asked him about it over coffee, his explanation seemed reasonable enough. "Oh, that's my brother's firm," Richard said casually. "I hired him to do some competitive analysis on our positioning. Standard business practice. I probably should have mentioned it, but it slipped my mind." But Sarah's instincts, honed by years of meticulous research, were telling her something wasn't right. That evening, she did what any good scientist would do. She investigated. Blackwood Strategic Solutions wasn't owned by Richard's brother. It was a shell company registered to Richard himself. The $50,000 hadn't paid for competitive analysis. According to the detailed invoices Sarah found buried in the company files, it had paid for proprietary technology transfer consultation and intellectual property valuation services. Technology transfer, her technology. Sarah spent the next week quietly digging deeper, using the same methodical approach that had made her innovations so successful. What she found made her blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, Richard had systematically been sharing MedTech's proprietary information with their biggest competitor, Titan Medical Systems. The consulting invoices were just the tip of the iceberg. There were encrypted email accounts, offshore banking records, and a paper trail that painted a devastating picture of corporate espionage. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Chapter 3, The Devastating Truth. If you're shocked by this level of corporate betrayal, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted? Make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get so much worse. Sarah's investigation revealed a betrayal so systematic and thorough that it took her breath away. Richard hadn't just been sharing information with Titan Medical. He'd been positioning himself to sell the entire company to them in a hostile takeover that would leave Sarah with nothing. The plan was diabolically clever. Over the past 2 years, Richard had been slowly diluting Sarah's ownership through a series of emergency funding rounds that he claimed were necessary for expansion. Each round brought in investors who were secretly backed by Titan Medical, gradually reducing Sarah's controlling interest from 55% to 47%. Meanwhile, Richard had been feeding Titan detailed information about Sarah's research pipeline, upcoming patent applications, and proprietary manufacturing processes. In exchange, Titan was paying him consulting fees through various shell companies and had promised him the CEO position when they completed their acquisition of MedTech. But the most devastating betrayal was personal. Richard had been systematically undermining Sarah's reputation within the company and industry. He'd been spreading rumors that she was difficult to work with, too focused on research to understand business, and holding back the company's potential with her perfectionist tendencies. Sarah found emails where Richard told investors that MedTech's real value lay in its business operations and market position, not Sarah's inventions. He'd convinced several major clients that the company would be more stable under experienced business leadership, rather than relying on academic researchers. The final piece of evidence was a recorded phone call that Sarah discovered on Richard's company laptop, a call where he laughed about how easy it had been to manipulate the naive scientist, and boasted about how much money he'd make when Titan's acquisition went through. "She's brilliant at inventing things," Richard had said, "but she has no idea how business really works. By the time she figures out what's happening, I'll own everything she's built." Sarah sat in her empty office late that Friday night, staring at the evidence spread across her desk. The company she'd poured her life into, the innovations that could save thousands of lives, the team she'd built from nothing, all of it was being stolen by the person she'd trusted most. But Dr. Sarah Mitchell hadn't become one of the country's leading medical technology innovators by giving up when faced with impossible challenges. And she was about to remind Richard Blackwood why you should never underestimate a brilliant scientist who's been betrayed. Chapter 4, The Counter-Strategy. Sarah spent the weekend planning her response with the same methodical precision she brought to her research. She couldn't compete with Richard's business connections or financial resources, but she had something more valuable. She was smarter than him, and he'd underestimated her completely. First, Sarah secured her intellectual property. She'd been careful to keep all critical patents and trade secrets in her name, but Richard's plan clearly involved challenging those rights during the acquisition. Sarah contacted the best intellectual property lawyers in the country and had them create an impenetrable legal fortress around her innovations. Next, she began documenting everything. Every stolen file, every forged signature, every fraudulent investor meeting, Sarah compiled evidence with the thoroughness of a peer-reviewed research paper. She also installed monitoring software on the company network to track Richard's continued espionage activities in real time. But Sarah's masterstroke was recognizing that Richard's plan had a fatal flaw. It depended on secrecy. He needed the acquisition to appear legitimate, which meant he couldn't let anyone know about his true relationship with Titan Medical. Sarah decided to use that secrecy against him. She began strategically leaking information, not about Richard's betrayal, but about Titan Medical's aggressive acquisition strategy. She made sure key employees, investors, and industry contacts heard rumors that Titan was planning hostile takeovers of several innovative medical device companies. Meanwhile, Sarah quietly reached out to European and Asian medical device manufacturers who were looking to enter the American market. She offered them exclusive licensing deals for her technology, deals that would be impossible to honor if Titan acquired MedTech. But Sarah's most brilliant move was setting a trap that would force Richard to expose himself publicly. Chapter 5, The Setup. 3 weeks after discovering Richard's betrayal, Sarah called an emergency board meeting. She'd spent those weeks carefully positioning all the pieces for what would become the most spectacular corporate downfall in recent memory. "I've discovered something troubling," Sarah told the 7 board members, including Richard. "I have evidence that someone within our company has been sharing proprietary information with competitors." Richard's face remained perfectly composed. He was, after all, an experienced liar. "That's a serious accusation, Sarah. Do you have proof?" "I do, but before I reveal it, I want to give the responsible party a chance to come forward. Corporate espionage carries criminal penalties, but cooperation might lead to a more lenient outcome." Sarah watched Richard carefully. He was calculating, probably wondering if she discovered his shell companies or if this was just a fishing expedition. "I think we should involve law enforcement immediately," Richard said, playing his part perfectly. "Corporate espionage is a felony. We can't let someone steal years of our hard work." "I agree completely," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Which is why I've already contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division. They'll be here Thursday to begin their investigation." Richard's composure cracked for just a moment, a barely perceptible pause that Sarah caught immediately. He was trapped. If he pushed for the FBI investigation, they'd discover his own crimes. If he tried to discourage it, he'd look suspicious. "Of course," he said finally. "We need to protect the company's interests." But Sarah knew Richard would never let it get that far. He'd have to act soon to complete the Titan acquisition before the FBI investigation exposed everything. And when he did, Sarah would be ready. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. This is where the story gets absolutely insane. If you're loving this corporate chess match, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment about your worst workplace betrayal story. Richard took the bait perfectly. That very evening, he called an emergency meeting with Titan Medical's executives to accelerate their acquisition timeline. Sarah knew about the meeting because she'd been monitoring his communications, and because she'd arranged for it to happen exactly when and where she wanted it to. The meeting took place in Titan's boardroom, with Richard presenting his final proposal. A quick, clean acquisition that would happen before any FBI investigation could complicate matters. He offered to deliver all of Sarah's proprietary research, client contracts, and manufacturing specifications in exchange for a premium CEO salary and equity position. What Richard didn't know was that Sarah had been recording everything. She'd planted sophisticated surveillance equipment in Titan's offices weeks earlier, using her access as a potential collaborator. They'd been trying to recruit. Every word of Richard's treasonous presentation was captured in crystal-clear audio and video. But Sarah's real masterstroke was what happened next. She'd arranged for copies of the recording to be delivered simultaneously to several key parties: the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, MedTech's legitimate investors, and most importantly, the business press. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with the force of a financial earthquake. CEO caught on tape selling company to competitor, screamed the headline of the Wall Street Journal. The recording was devastating, not just Richard's confession to corporate espionage, but his arrogant laughter about betraying Sarah and his crude comments about stupid inventors who don't understand real business. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Business news channels played the audio on repeat. Social media exploded with outrage about corporate betrayal. MedTech's stock price plummeted as investors fled, but not for the reasons Richard expected. By Wednesday, both Richard and Titan Medical's executives were under federal investigation for corporate espionage, fraud, and securities violations. Richard was fired immediately by MedTech's board and faced both criminal prosecution and civil lawsuits that would bankrupt him completely. But Sarah's revenge was far from complete. Chapter 7, The Complete Destruction. The recording had been damaging enough, but Sarah had saved her most devastating evidence for the federal prosecutors. She presented them with 18 months of documented espionage activities, including detailed records of every stolen file and shared document, bank records showing payments from Titan to Richard's shell companies, email evidence of the planned hostile takeover, proof that several investors in MedTech were actually Titan subsidiaries, documentation showing how Richard had systematically undermined Sarah's ownership. The case was so airtight that Richard's lawyers advised him to accept a plea bargain immediately. He faced up to 20 years in federal prison for corporate espionage, securities fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Titan Medical's involvement was equally damaging. The FBI discovered that the company had been engaged in systematic corporate espionage against multiple competitors, using Richard's betrayal as their template. Their executives faced their own criminal charges, and the company's stock price collapsed as investors realized the extent of their illegal activities. But the criminal prosecution was only the beginning of Richard's destruction. Sarah filed civil lawsuits for breach of contract, fiduciary duty violations, and theft of trade secrets. The courts froze all of Richard's assets pending resolution of the cases. His reputation in the business community was completely destroyed. No company would hire him, no investors would work with him, and no bank would lend to him. The media coverage was relentless. Business schools used the case as a cautionary tale about corporate ethics. Richard's former colleagues publicly distanced themselves from him. Even his family was embarrassed by the scandal and the crude comments he'd made about Sarah on the recording. Within 6 months, Richard Blackwood went from celebrated CEO to unemployed pariah facing decades in prison. His house was foreclosed, his assets seized, and his future destroyed by his own arrogance and greed. Chapter 8, Sarah's Phoenix Moment. While Richard's world crumbled, Sarah rebuilt her company stronger than ever. The publicity from exposing the corporate espionage had an unexpected benefit. It positioned her as a brilliant scientist who was also savvy enough to outmaneuver experienced corporate criminals. Investors who'd been manipulated by Richard's lies now understood the true value of Sarah's innovations. Venture capital firms competed to fund her expansion. Medical device manufacturers worldwide sought partnerships with the woman who'd outsmarted one of the industry's most sophisticated espionage operations. Sarah restructured MedTech Innovations as a privately held company with herself as sole owner. She bought out all investors at fair market value, ensuring complete control over her technology and vision. The company's valuation, boosted by the positive publicity and newly secured international contracts, reached $85 million. More importantly, Sarah's innovations were saving lives on a scale she'd only dreamed of. Major hospitals were installing her cardiac monitoring systems globally, and early detection rates were improving dramatically. The devices Richard had tried to steal were now preventing thousands of deaths annually. Sarah also used her experience to help other inventors and entrepreneurs protect themselves from corporate betrayal. She established a foundation that provided legal and business education to scientists transitioning from research to commercial applications. I learned that brilliant technology isn't enough, she told a conference of medical researchers. You also need to be smarter than the people trying to steal it from you. Trust your innovations to the right people, but verify everything. The Foundation's first initiative was creating template partnership agreements that protected inventors' intellectual property and prevented the kind of systematic betrayal Sarah had experienced. Chapter 9, The Final Reckoning. 2 years after the boardroom recordings destroyed Richard's life, Sarah received a letter from federal prison. Richard, now serving a 12-year sentence, wanted to apologize and seek forgiveness for his betrayal. The letter was pathetic, full of self-pity and attempts to minimize his actions. Richard claimed he'd been pressured by Titan Medical and suggested that Sarah's success proved his betrayal hadn't really hurt her. He asked if she might consider writing a letter to support his early parole application. Sarah's response was swift and brutal. Richard asterisk, your letter demonstrates that you still don't understand what you did wrong. You didn't just steal my technology or money. You tried to destroy the innovations that are now saving thousands of lives annually. Your betrayal wasn't a business disagreement. It was an attempt to prevent life-saving medical devices from reaching the patients who needed them. You spent years lying to my face while plotting to steal everything I'd built. You undermined my reputation, manipulated investors, and showed recording devices how little respect you had for the naive scientist who trusted you. The recordings speak for themselves. You're not sorry for betraying me. You're sorry you got caught. You're not seeking forgiveness. You're seeking my help to reduce your punishment. I won't provide either. I hope you spend every day of your sentence thinking about the lives that could have been saved if you'd been honest instead of greedy. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, CEO, MedTech Innovations. Sarah never heard from Richard again, but she did hear about him through mutual contacts in the business world. Even after his eventual release from prison, no legitimate company would hire him. He'd been permanently blacklisted from the medical device industry and worked a series of low-level sales jobs under constant suspicion from employers who'd Googled his name. The man who tried to steal a medical technology empire ended up selling insurance door to door, a living reminder of what happens when betrayal meets someone smarter and more determined than you anticipated. Chapter 10, Legacy of Justice. Before we wrap up this incredible story of corporate betrayal and perfect revenge, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more tailies, where greed meets its match and justice prevails in the business world. 5 years after Richard's arrest, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood before the World Health Organization in Geneva, accepting their Innovation in Medical Technology award. MedTech's cardiac monitoring systems were now standard equipment in hospitals across 43 countries, and mortality rates in intensive care units had dropped significantly wherever they were installed. This technology exists because brilliant people refuse to give up when faced with impossible challenges, Sarah said in her acceptance speech. But it also exists because we must never stop fighting for what's right, even when the people we trust most try to destroy us. In the audience, medical professionals from around the world gave her a standing ovation. Many of them had no idea about the corporate betrayal that had nearly destroyed the innovations now saving lives in their hospitals. They only knew that Dr. Sarah Mitchell had created something revolutionary and then fought to make it available globally. But Sarah's real legacy wasn't just her medical innovations. It was the transformation of how young scientists and inventors protected themselves in the business world. Her foundation had educated thousands of researchers about corporate law, partnership structures, and intellectual property protection. The Mitchell Protocols, as they became known, were standard practices taught in business schools and recommended by intellectual property lawyers. These protocols had prevented dozens of other inventors from experiencing the kind of systematic betrayal Sarah had endured. Sarah's company had grown into a global corporation with over 800 employees and research facilities on 3 continents. But she'd never taken it public, never accepted outside investors, and never again trusted a business partner with access to her core innovations. I learned that success isn't about trusting the right people, she told a gathering of young entrepreneurs. It's about building systems that make trust irrelevant. Verify everything, document everything, and always assume that anyone with access to your life's work might try to steal it. The medical technology industry had been transformed by both Sarah's innovations and her cautionary tale. Companies now implemented strict protocols for protecting proprietary information, and partnership agreements included safeguards that made corporate espionage much more difficult. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was personal. Sarah had married Dr. James Wang, a fellow medical researcher who respected her work and shared her values. Their relationship was built on mutual admiration, shared goals, and absolute honesty, everything her partnership with Richard had pretended to be but never was. As Sarah looked out at the Geneva audience, she felt something she'd never experienced during her partnership with Richard. Complete confidence that she was surrounded by people who genuinely wanted her to succeed. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had ultimately freed her to build the life and career she actually deserved. Epilogue, The Cost of Betrayal. 7 years have passed since the boardroom recordings that destroyed Richard Blackwood's life and transformed Dr. Sarah Mitchell into one of the world's most respected medical technology innovators. The contrast between their current situations tells the complete story of what happens when betrayal meets brilliance. Sarah's medtech innovations is now valued at over $300 million and has saved an estimated 50,000 lives worldwide. Her cardiac monitoring technology is considered the gold standard in intensive care medicine. She's been featured on magazine covers, awarded honorary doctorates, and consulted by governments on medical technology policy. More importantly, Sarah found peace and happiness that had been impossible during the years when Richard was systematically betraying her trust. Her marriage is strong, her work is fulfilling, and she sleeps well at night knowing that her innovations are making the world better. Richard, meanwhile, serves as a living cautionary tale about the ultimate cost of corporate betrayal. After his release from federal prison, he discovered that his reputation had been permanently destroyed. The business world has a long memory, and the recordings of his arrogant betrayal continue to circulate whenever his name comes up. He lost everything: his career, his wealth, his family, his freedom, and his future. The man who thought he was smarter than the naive scientist learned too late that brilliance beats cunning, integrity outlasts deception, and karma always balances the books. The medical technology industry still talks about the Mitchell-Blackwood case as the perfect example of why corporate integrity matters. Richard's betrayal didn't just destroy his own life. It became a permanent reminder of what happens when greed overrules ethics. But the most important lesson isn't about punishment, it's about resilience. Sarah's story proves that even the most devastating betrayal can become the foundation for unprecedented success if you're smart enough, strong enough, and determined enough to fight back. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you creates the opportunity for the best thing that could happen to you. Richard's betrayal forced Sarah to take complete control of her innovations and build a company that reflected her true vision and values. In the end, the person who tried to steal Sarah's life's work gave her the greatest gift imaginable: absolute certainty about who she could trust and unshakable confidence in her own abilities. Corporate betrayal taught Dr. Sarah Mitchell that success isn't about finding trustworthy partners. It's about becoming so strong, so smart, and so well protected that betrayal becomes irrelevant. And when you reach that level of professional and personal security, no one can ever steal your dreams again. Thank you for watching Consequences & Co. This story of corporate betrayal and brilliant revenge shows us that in the business world, intelligence and integrity will always triumph over greed and deception. If Sarah's story of turning devastating betrayal into unprecedented success inspired you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what lesson hit you hardest. Subscribe for more incredible stories where karma finds its way into every boardroom and justice always prevails. Remember, in business as in life, every choice has consequences, and every betrayal eventually meets its match. Subscribe now for more stories where the brilliant beat the greedy and justice always wins.